get started. Okay, welcome everyone. Thanks for attending this session. I'm very delighted that we've got two fascinating speakers who will be covering the subject of open badges. The first speaker will be Doug Belshaw. I'm sure many of you will know Doug's work on digital literacies and open badges. So Doug will be sort of laying out the concept of what we mean by open badges, and then we'll transfer to Tim Riches, who is from DigitalMe, and he will be talking about sort of practical implementation of badges. So I'll just hand over to Doug. Thank you.
Thank you, Grania. So yeah, I'm Doug Belshaw. I'm going to be talking about open badges today. As Grania said, do come near the front. That'd be good. Good, right, so I'm Doug Belshaw. This is Tim over here. He's from DigitalMe. I'm going to be talking about a DML competition later on. That was a competition, American competition, but worldwide as well. And Tim's company was one of the winners of that. And I'll be talking about that in a moment. If you're tweeting, if you're talking about this on social networks, use obviously the iDragon hashtag, but also use the hashtag open badges, which is used not only for this conference, but worldwide when we're talking about open badges. So do put that in there as well. So, as Grania said, my name is Doug Belshaw. I tweet as @DAJ Belshaw, or at conferences, so I don't really hack off people by tweeting too much, @DAJBigConf. I currently work for Jisc Infonet, based in Newcastle at Northumbria University, but as of next month, I'll be working for the Mozilla Foundation full-time, because they've asked me to do that, so that's quite nice. So I'm kind of here in a semi-official capacity today. I haven't quite started for them yet, but I will be next month. I'm going to be badges and skills lead, which means I'll be working on web literacies for them and also evangelizing open badges like I'm doing today. And I'm very much looking forward to your questions at the end, so I realize you'll be wanting to apply to your particular context. So, let's get started. I want to talk today about something which is so important, I think, that I'm willing to move jobs over it. I'm willing to kind of give up a job which I actually love at the moment to go and do something for Mozilla Foundation, which I think is actually the future of accreditation. It's something which I wish was around when I was younger, and I want to work as hard as I can to make sure that it's in place, so that when my kids, who are 5 years old and 18 months or older, they can have the opportunity to use this accreditation system. I want that to be in place for them. But what are badges? Well, badges really are visual representations of a skill or an achievement. When I say badges, what's the first thing that pops into your head? Just shout it out. If I say badges to you. Scouts, exactly. Okay, so scouting is probably the first example that comes to mind for everybody. Well done for getting the right answer. When I was in Cub Scouts, I was actually too scared to go into proper Big Scouts because they were big, scary, hairy boys. But I had 29 badges in Cub Scouts. And I also used to swim competitively, so I had lots of swimming badges. So I had 29 Cub Scout badges on my arm. And I had lots of swimming badges on my tracksuit bottoms. And obviously I used to think I used to look really cool with my woggle and my kind of Scouts badge and my things like that. Other people might not have thought so. But I had lots of badges. And in fact, this morning I unlocked a badge. I had a different image until I arrived here today. If you look at the bottom of that, it says that I unlocked the train spotter badge on Foursquare by checking into Glasgow Queen Street this morning, because that meant I checked into a number of train stations on Foursquare. If you don't know what Foursquare is, basically you check into places. It's a game, you get badges, you can see where your friends are, all that kind of stuff. It's kind of gamification, it's badges. So some of these are for achievements, but some are just for fun or social status. So I can see where people like, some of you all know Ewan McIntosh. Ewan McIntosh uses this like all the time, right? And he tweets out to Twitter and everything like that. So I can see where Ewan is and Tom, and I can see where other people are. And some of it's just for fun, some of it's quite useful. You can see where people are near you. But badges have a serious purpose as well. So I don't know how many of you are aware of this website, which is called Stack Overflow. So this is used by kind of hardcore, geeky, techie people. And this is a community. So it's got badges for real skills, from beginners to experts. You can earn these different badges. I don't know if that's too small for you to be able to see. There's different things like enthusiast and teacher and critic and fanatic. So there's some fun things and there's some things which are actually quite useful. And it demonstrates kind of your community status. So you have those little badges next to your username when you're in the forums, when you're contributing things as well. So I know whether to listen to you or not, or what type of background you've got. It's an indication, it's a signifier of what it is that you do. So these reflect both technical and social abilities, but also these are the kind of skills that employers want as well. So I recently finished my doctorate. So I've got a BA in philosophy, I've got an MA in modern history, and I've got a doctorate in education. But when I was hired by Mozilla, they didn't look at any of those. They weren't particularly bothered. They were more interested in the fact that, you know, I promote things on social networks, I'm a team player, I get on well with people at conferences, I can present reasonably well, all that kind of stuff. They don't really care the fact that I've got a doctorate. So these type of skills are important for employers at every level. And in fact, Stack Overflow has got a website called Careers 2.0 where employers can search for these skills. So it's not just like nice to have, it's actually things that people can use in practice. So that's kind of badges for fun and badges in a particular setting for Stack Overflow. But what if we used badges for learning? Wouldn't that be awesome as well? So that could be inside or outside formal education, and I'm not really talking about kind of replacing the things that we've got already. We don't need to say, let's get rid of the old and in with the new. These are to augment what we've already got, to fill in the gaps, because we've got new ways of learning, and we've got new ways of accrediting things, hopefully, if we use open badges. So Mozilla launched a pilot early in 2011, and that was called School of Webcraft. And basically people, and this was coders in this example, could award each other badges. So this is the new version of kind of School of Webcraft, and you can earn open badges by going to peer-to-peer university. That's p2pu.org. You can earn badges on there. You can join a community. You can award badges to other people. It's that kind of thing. So there's lots of different ways you can use badges. You can use them online in this kind of community setting, like Stack Overflow, like peer-to-peer university. But also, when you're at school, I used to be a teacher. I used to be director of e-learning of an academy. Then I worked for Jisc, and now I'm going to work for Mozilla. So I'm aware of kind of what happens in schools, the way in which sometimes we give things which aren't incredibly useful to people, like a certificate of commemoration for a Jubilee activity that my son got the other day. He's not really going to use that at any point in the future. And we do a similar kind of thing when we get to teenage years as well. We give people rewards which mean nothing out of that particular ecosystem. Whereas with open badges, as I'm going to explain, if you've got an ecosystem which everyone can plug into, then people can recognize those skills outside that particular community. So after school programs in the US, and sorry these examples tend to be in the US, this slide deck I blatantly stole from who's going to be my boss, Erin Knight. The American Museum of National History, NASA, the US Department of Education, Disney, lots and lots of big names involved, especially through the DML competition, which Tim will probably say a little bit more about in his presentation. And also community organizations like the Scouts, like any kind of swimming badges, anything like that. You can basically, if you're learning something and you want to recognize that learning, you can do so. So that's lots of different examples of where we can earn badges and earn certificates and have credentialization of learning. But what if we all use the same badge ecosystem and infrastructure? And what if all that was open and available to anybody as open source software to install on their own server so they can award badges? Wouldn't that be awesome? Well, that's where open badges come along. Learners can show what they've learned and what they know from various places and bring it together in one place. Educators can engage learners by giving them meaningful rewards, and employers can find people with non-traditional skills, the type of things that you don't just find at universities and schools, but more tangible things as well. So it works a bit like this. The learner does something, whatever it is that you want them to do. The badge issuer at the top, they issue a badge to the learner. Now, the learner can either accept or refuse that badge and put it in their badge backpack, and then they can choose to display it on various sites. So, for example, LinkedIn are coming on board in early 2013, as are sites like Tumblr, potentially Facebook. You can self-host these things. On my blog at dougbelshaw.com/blog, I've got some badges in the sidebar. You can put them as widgets in there. And then you can display things in various places, and that can lead to opportunities. It doesn't have to lead to opportunities, but it's one of those things where you can unlock privileges and opportunities by displaying those things. So I'm not going to go into the technical details, but basically this is how it works. It's more than just a badge. It's more than me just giving you like a Cub Scout badge. It's totally more than that. It's important that it needs to be more than that. Otherwise, I could earn a badge, put it on my blog, and you could copy and paste it and put it on yours, and that wouldn't be very satisfactory. So basically, you get the metadata baked into the badge. And what that means is, when you click on it, and you can do this by going on my blog now if you want, dougbelshaw.com/blog, Click on the badge and you'll see the metadata, the unique identifier to say that I have actually achieved that badge. And also, if you click on a different link, it shows you what I had to do to achieve that badge. It shows me the criteria for the badge. And this could just be anything. I could award, like Tim, a badge today for being an awesome presenter. And that wouldn't really mean very much in the whole scheme of things if it just comes from me. But if, for example, I don't know, like the US Department of Education or the Department of Education or Joe Wilson, for example, endorsed my badge, then that all of a sudden means something more. So it depends, it's going to be an ecosystem, it's going to develop and it's going to grow. But the important thing is that the metadata is baked right into the badge so you can see how it was awarded and that it was actually awarded to that person. It's a unique identifier. But why do we need this? Have we not already got systems in place, like school systems and academic systems and out-of-school systems? We've not already got that kind of thing. What's wrong with what we've got? What's the need to have something different? Well, first of all, we've got more access to information than ever before. I can remember, I must have been in Northumberland, we have middle schools, so I must have been in middle school. And I remember wanting to learn something about like dinosaurs, or it might have been about machines or something like that. And I'd be at home, and if I wanted to find something out quickly, this must have been like 1992, I would have to physically go down to the library and get out the book, and if they didn't have it, I'd have to order it in, then be 2 weeks later. I wasn't actually that bothered about that little bit of information, but now obviously, and it's so banal it's hardly even worth mentioning, we just look it up. Like Sheila can just go now and quickly look things up on her iPad. You can very, very easily find out information. And I don't need to tell you, that's a complete game changer. That means that not only can you learn things by yourself, but you've got access to a world of information that you didn't have before, which means that you can learn things that weren't possible. You can put together your own kind of learning program. Some people might have seen MOOCs, massive open online courses. That's a way, a semi-structured way, for you to have a journey through some information. And that wasn't possible 10 years ago, 20 years ago. There's also more opportunities to learn. There's more people putting on stuff because the barrier to entry and the cost for doing so is so much lower. So, for example, you have after-school programs, you have NASA putting stuff online, you have the MOOCs that I talked about before, you have maker fairs, you have people joining up together to do stuff. All these things that just didn't exist before or had substantial kind of costs and implications. So we need a way to recognize learning that is happening anyway, regardless of where or when it happens. We need to make sure that we can credentialize that in some way, we can accredit it, we can show that people are learning these types of things. It leads to new pathways through knowledge. We need to kind of capture all new ways of learning. I mentioned MOOCs before. I think MOOCs would be really awesome for badges. I know some people who kind of deal with MOOCs might disagree. There's certainly some debates which I'm willing to engage in around gamification, around motivation, all that kind of stuff. But I think that they don't need to be the answer to everything, but there's certainly a way of credentializing some stuff that we already do. So badges help us get some way to where we need to be, I think. CVs are not telling us the whole story. The average person who looks at a CV looks at it for 6 seconds. They're looking for very specific information. And also new ways to learn are just not being credentialized, which means that people are being forced down a very academic route sometimes, and also down a formal education route that perhaps might not be appropriate to them at their time of life. So I want to run very, very quickly through 5 examples of how this can help. These are fictional examples, but they are based on true stories. So, very quickly. Eduardo, he's got no real digital skills. He's grown up in a community without access to that kind of digital divide kind of thing. But he is learning, and he wants to show this to employers. So the great thing about open badges is, and sorry to pimp my own website, but you can see this if you go to my website. You can see this like a clock, that you're halfway through earning that badge. So not only are you doing stuff that you've already completed, but you're showing that you're doing something at the moment. It's a kind of a way of showing that you're learning something, you're on your way of doing it. So I'm learning to play the guitar at the moment. I might have a badge showing that, I've got a beginner's 101 guitar. I might be halfway through that kind of thing. Another person, Sarah, okay, she's already gone beyond what her local college can offer in terms of web development. So what can she do? Well, she can learn online, but she's going to need some kind of credentialization, which is going to mean something to potential employers in future. And open badges could find a way through that, especially through things like peer-to-peer university. Jin, so she's an artist with a strong reputation in a particular community. Then she's moving, say, countries or to the other side of America or to just a different place. And she's worried that that kind of reputation is going to be completely lost. Well, she can show that through not just like LinkedIn recommendations, but badges for specific things, a bit like Stack Overflow in that respect. So she can show the status in which she's held in that particular community, so she doesn't have to start again. Sal, a parent who wants to switch careers, he's not sure how to add skills and change between those different careers. Well, he could do two things. First of all, he could credentialize the skills that he's already got through Open Badges. And also, he could look for people who have also done a similar thing to what he's done, switched careers midway through his life. And he could follow that kind of pathway through Open Badges, through the type of opportunities that person's got. He can kind of almost try and replicate somebody else's career, much as we do now by finding somebody and saying, I want to be like them in 10 years' time, and looking at the steps that they've taken through employment and through their qualifications as well. And then finally, this speaks directly to what I was talking about before. Karen, let's say she's a hiring manager and she's got too many applicants for a particular job, and that's especially the case given the current economic climate. The badges can show qualities that CVs and resumes often leave out, and it's a better fit than just being good on paper. Because I'm sure we've all been in a situation either as an employer or an interviewee where we've been to an interview and the person on paper is very different from the person in front of you. And badges can help kind of round out that picture. It's not the complete answer, but it helps round out that kind of more holistic picture. So I'm going to take some questions in a moment, but if you're interested in getting involved with this in some way, it's an open project. It's very much anyone can get involved. That's how I got involved, just by being a punter and getting involved and talking to people. You can come and talk to me afterwards. You can come and get in contact with me via dougbelshaw.com or DJ Belshaw on Twitter. But go to openbadges.org. This has recently been relaunched. You can earn your first badge on there by learning about what badges are, and you get your own badge backpack and stuff. That might help clarify some of the things that, some questions that might be in your mind. Also, if you click on, at the top, the little links, if you click on FAQ, there's a wonderful badges white paper which was written last year by Erin Knight, who's going to be my new boss, about some of the things that you might not even have thought about to do with questions about open badges. So, for example, if you've got an intrinsic motivation to do something and badges serve as an extrinsic motivation, does that crowd out that kind of intrinsic motivation? That's kind of an open question, but it points to issues like that and ways you can find out more things. That's the first place. Have a look on Twitter, the hashtag Open Badges. That's a useful place to start. Lots of links to people talking about on their blogs. Some people pushing back against it, which is fine. Some people saying this is how I'm using it now with my students, that kind of thing. And also, and Tim's going to talk about this probably a little bit more, the DML Competition. This was, the MacArthur Foundation in the US is massive, and they funded $2 million prize for people to implement open badges in practice. And I'm delighted to say that Tim at DigitalMe managed to win one of those competitions, and Supporter to Reporter, which he'll talk about in a moment, is a funded project and one which is ongoing right now. So I'm going to pause there and ask if you've got any questions. Hopefully I've tamed a little dragon there. I've left lots of time for questions before I hand over to Tim, so if you have got any, now would be a good time to ask them. We've got one at the back, and then Sheila. We've got a microphone, or we're going to have to shout them? Just shout them out, and I'll repeat them. It's fine. Do you want to say who you are first and where you're from? Then? Yeah, I can't see that. Okay, so the question was, how do I see the relationship between open badges and formal accreditation? So, first of all, there's people doing both. So, people like Alex Holloway and David Wiley in the US are already issuing open badges to students who are getting not only university credit, but they're getting open badges as well at the same time. So that's one way you can do things. In terms of how things are going to develop, I think initially, and I'm just predicting here, and all predictions tend to be wrong in some way, I think that probably what will happen is it'll develop much more in the informal space to start off with, in terms of developing around what we've already got. So the kind of things we've got through degrees and A-levels and GCSEs and curriculum for excellence and all that kind of stuff. It'll develop around that first, and I'm not saying it's going to replace, I don't think I'd want it to replace at the moment formal academic qualifications, but I think the idea is to augment what we've already got, to fill in the gaps with these new skills and new ways of knowing, a way of credentializing, all of that kind of stuff. I'm certainly willing to talk to you at the end about examples of all that kind of stuff and point you to places where there might be. Sheila. I know exactly what you mean, and given that I'm only the second person to be employed by the Mozilla Foundation in the UK, it is something which I'm trying gently to get across them. So the question was, is it too Americanized? And also, what happens if badges go mainstream when they become too formal? Answer to the first one is, let's get them mainstream first before we worry about that a bit too much. I don't think we can predict how they're going to be used, and because it's an ecosystem, and because it is open, some people, Pearson, are probably going to try and commoditize them a little bit and take over. But there's no reason why we can't push back at that. There's no reason why we can't award them however we want, because they are completely open. In terms of the Americanization, that's something that I feel very strongly with most stuff that comes out of America. I had a conversation with someone who will remain nameless on Skype a couple of nights ago, and I was trying to get across to them just the different subtle point of view between the UK and America when we're talking about exactly the same thing. Like, it doesn't always... Like, I was trying to get across the point of teaching being much more of an art than a science, and you can't always get hard facts about things, which I think Paul talked about really well in his keynote. He started off with all the hard stuff, and then said, well, yeah, but sometimes we have to kind of play around the edges a little bit. So don't worry, I'll be doing all that kind of stuff from the UK point of view. I won't become too Americanized, and I'm very, very willing to kind of get everyone else on board who's interested as well. I think there's someone over there at the back. Can you say who you are and where you're from first?
Yes, so my name is Margaret Carey. I'm from the IRC Scotland, and I'm an inclusion advisor here. Really interested in this whole area of work, and interested in the possibilities for maybe learners who struggle to achieve accreditation via the current SEQ framework, and particularly maybe students with maybe learning disabilities or maybe more profound complex needs. And I wonder if that was something that had been considered in the context of this whole development.
Absolutely. So the question, if you didn't hear, was about learners with learning difficulties potentially being able to, this might be a good system for them. So the wonderful thing about this is I think that when we're talking about personalization, it really does take account of context, because anybody can issue badges to pretty much anyone. So peer-to-peer learning, you can credentialize that. Tim, do tell me to shut up when it's time for you to go on. Right, okay, cool. Because you can give badges to each other, peer-to-peer learning, you can take stuff and then apply to a particular context, all that kind of stuff. Sometimes I think, and I don't really want to set up a dichotomy between badges and kind of academic credentials, because actually I think they're both going in the same direction, they're parallel. But sometimes, I've certainly experienced this, in formal education settings, things can not be such a good fit for certain people at certain times in their life and given their particular context, and the potential for badges, because they are so extensible and changeable and personalizable, to be able to credentialize slightly different things from what is usually given. But I take Sheila's point about sometimes they might be taken to be too formal eventually, and we have to kind of militate against that, I think. I've got one more? Yep. Excellent. I've got answers to both of your questions. So the first one was about prior learning, and the second one was about e-portfolios. So the first one about prior learning, I've already spoken to somebody about stealth assessment and about people having credits for stuff, but they didn't realise they had enough to get a qualification, and a way in which open badges could kind of unlock that for you and say, hey, did you know that you've got enough credits to unlock this badge or this accreditation? And you say, yes, I do want that, or no, I'm actually saving up those credits and those badges for something else. Stealth assessment is awesome and something I'm willing to talk to you about afterwards. Second thing about e-portfolios, there's a whole Mozilla track at the International E-Portfolios Conference, which I'm talking at next month in London. So if you want to come along to that, fantastic. All right. I was also in Ireland last week talking to some people about Mahara and about how badges can kind of fit in with that. So absolutely, that's totally kind of top of the list priority for what we're doing. Right, if there's no more questions, I think I need to hand over to Tim now. So thank you very much.
So there'll be an opportunity for some more questions at the end of Tim's session as well.
Okay.
Have you got that okay? Ah, there we go. There we go. Right. Okay, yeah, just thinking back to the DML competition, Doug just reminded me of it. It was an unusual competition. Usually you'll send off an application form, someone will look at a funding application form, and then you'll find out whether you get the cash or not to develop a project. But they flew 100 people to San Francisco, which was nice, and it was a series of pitches. And I remember going up into one of the pitch corridors, and sometimes you'd meet someone else who was pitching, and I met this guy, and he seemed really nervous, and I said, so, you know, how's it going? So I'm really nervous about going to Belshaw. Where are you from? He said, NASA. So that instantly made me feel a lot better. And he had this incredible robotics program that he was running with children. And I think that was one of the key things that I took away from the DML competition. It was lots of really exciting learning projects that were looking for an accreditation, an assessment home, a recognition home. So there was the robotics program, there was Disney who were doing, I think it was a kind of nature trail program. There's BuzzMath who were doing, BuzzMath, should watch the Americanization there. BuzzMaths to us it would be, who were doing a maths program. But it's coming from a different direction, I suppose. Rather than coming from accreditation, it's coming from the direction that there's interesting projects happening and we can see fantastic learning happening, but how do we accredit it? And that's one of the main problems for us as an organisation. What we're interested in, what we work on, is project-based learning. And what we're excited about in terms of the internet, I've been working in social media and the internet for about 10 years, is how can we give young people really exciting learning opportunities which reflect the outside world? That's what's interesting about the internet. So rather than the project I'm going to talk to you about today is supporter to reporter, rather than teaching young people about media or what it might be like to be a sports reporter, is actually to be a sports reporter. All of the tools are available to us now to do that. When I first started working on the internet, it was dial-up connection, and it was kids queuing outside the receptionist's office to get onto the computer and upload stuff onto the internet. Now the tools are just so widely available and so easily available now, and I think that real-life learning is a real powerful thing. We work with thousands of schools, or have worked with thousands of schools across the UK and internationally, and lots of really keen teachers. Keen teachers can see the benefit of this particular approach. They can see skills in terms of speaking and listening, critical thinking, team working, digital literacy, etc. passionate teachers who will go back to school and they'll make it happen. They might make it happen in after schools club, or they might make it happen in the main timetable. But I always get the sense that those teachers are succeeding in spite of the curriculum rather than because of it. And that's what's so interesting for us about badges, because it allows us just to look at accreditation again and just reimagine it completely. I will just say before I show you the implementation that we're in the middle of designing and building at the moment. Excuse me. It's not a finished system, but it goes one step on from what Doug was saying. Excuse me. And shows what it could look like in practice. But here's one inspirational character to turn to when you're trying to do something different. And I love that quote. If we're going to do something a little bit different, we're going to have to do something away from the norm, and open badges is certainly that. We were looking at badges before the open badge competition came along, and we were looking at rewards and the internet and how we could use badging for rewards. One of the systems which Doug mentioned was Foursquare, and I guess we were asking what could we take from the internet, because the internet actually does badges quite well, and Doug's talked about some of the sort of learning badges are out there, and he mentioned Foursquare as well. And one thing I admire about Foursquare in the commercial world is that they understand an end-to-end relationship. They understand how they will tell the user how to earn the badge, but they will also make it very clear what the reward is at the end. And I think that's one thing for open badges that we've been mindful of when we're designing the system, is what does it mean for the learner? We've always got to ask the question, so what? If you get an S2R medal, what does it mean? If you get a BuzzMass medal, if you get a NASA robotics medal, what does it mean? So some of the questions that were coming about the value to universities, the value to employer are really key and critical to us. In the last presentation I was asking a group of head teachers and deputies if they'd ever heard of this, and one of them put their hand up and said, yeah, I'm the mayor of the school. And I said, I said, what did that mean to you? Just hoping that that would mean something. And he said, well, it meant I got a promotion, because the head teacher realised that I knew about new technology, I knew it was going on out there, and that was a really good connection. It's what something that a badge can do in practice. The other area or badge I'd like to draw your attention to is eBay. I don't know if anyone's keen eBayers out there. Now, if you see this badge down here, if you see a power seller, what do you feel? Safer. You feel confident. And that badge and that confidence is built up through trust. And there's an interesting difference, I think, between the trust that this brings and traditional accreditation brings. And that trust is built through the community. It's built over time through lots of interactions between a community. And that's, again, something that I'm very interested in terms of open badging and how we can get the community involved in peer assessment and peer critique. And that's something I'll touch on. So I'm going to run you through now a practical implementation. We're about halfway through building and designing this at the moment. We have actually issued some badges already, but actually that's the easy bit, issuing the badges. It's the rest of the system around it which is more complex. There's going to be some practical ways for you to get involved. If you work with young people already, there's a pilot scheme. So if you're interested in open badges, you haven't got a badge you want to build yet, but you want to try it, I'll give you some information on how you can get involved. So, Supports to Report, so it's a sports reporting programme for young people. It's a website where all the content is created by young people. We've been running it for several years now. It's been supported by the Football Foundation, various other funders, and we're currently working with LOCOG and the Olympics. We're training young sports reporters to go and report at the Olympics. And we've got a 2012 reporter badge as well, so a very practical project you can get involved in. We've got 3 different badges in S2R, so we've kind of worked backwards from the programme and looked at what skills are developed and how can we badge them. The first is around journalists, so that's about developing reporter skills, journalistic skills. It's about publishing content online, it's about going out, it's about interviewing Then we have a producer badge. Now that's actually about, you could earn your journalist badge without actually interacting with anyone else. The producer badge is about working as a team to go and report at an event. And then the coach badge, which is really important, is about passing on your skills to other people within the community, and that's a real crucial part of the S2R programme. In practice, it works in schools. We don't work much in colleges, but we do work in after-schools clubs. It works by going and reporting, young people going and reporting from local games. So this is a school sports day. There's one on the right in Salford and one in Latvia. So it's very accessible. These things happen all the time around schools and educational institutions. And then at the other end of the scale, we work on major national events as well. So I think this is a Wembley, a cup final at Wembley. And we were at the Olympic Park last week as well with some young reporters. So it's accessible in terms of local games, but also we've got these high-profile opportunities for young people as well. The content is published on a website called Radio Waves. I don't know if you've come across that before. There's a supporter to reporter network on there. It's a kind of a mix between a YouTube and a Facebook for schools. So there's some security, some moderation in place. And I can't say this in many places, but Radio Waves is really big in Fife. Virtually every school in Fife uses Radio Waves, not necessarily supported to reporter, but they use the publishing platform. I'm going to be interested in a few years looking back whether there's going to be a spike in the creative industries and web making in Fife, and people are going to go, well, why was that? So if you want to see a really good exemplar of how user-generated content is produced by young people and children, Fife is a really good example, and it's not too far away. So they publish the content on Radio Waves. We also get them to manage Twitter feeds as well. There's a couple of web addresses for you to have a look at those later.